globalization has a bad reputation, doesn't it? We always hear about big business and crashing financial markets and terrible environmental problems. Yet one of the most profound influences of globalization is actually quite lovely. It's about what's happening to people. People from everywhere are falling in love with people from everywhere else. It used to be that only princes and aristocrats, you know, the jet-set crowd, they could afford to travel the world looking for love. But today, globalization and technology are bringing people together in new and exciting ways. So people are meeting and falling in love because they're working together. They're at those big businesses, or they're going to international conferences, trying to find solutions for those terrible environmental problems. And people are meeting online, of course. 5% of Americans say they met their partner online. This is making it very difficult for the girl next door. You know, she now has international competition on the dating market. And it's not just on online dating sites, it's also in chat rooms, right? So people from all over the world, they can come together and share their interests and then their passions, sometimes for one another. And students fall in love, because as we know, students are always falling in love. And now they're going on international exchange programs, and so one semester abroad is turning into forever, right? Exhibit A, right here. And people are traveling more internationally. So they are falling in love when they're on their holidays, you know, when they're on a beach in Crete. Because, you know, when you have a nice tan and you've been drinking ouzo, you know, it's a proven formula, isn't it? And who knows? Some people may even fall in love at TED Talks, right? Who knows what's going to happen tonight? My point is, there is a world of romance happening out there. And it's leading to multicultural romance and marriage, and it's leading to international families and intercultural families. Ultimately, it's leading to the globalization of love. If we take a look around the world, starting right here in Vienna, in Austria, 18% of all new marriages are considered multicultural. In Korea, it's 10%, and in the United States, it's as high as 15%. And then there are some real multicultural hotspots. Vienna is one of them, Munich, Toronto, where the stats are even as high as 30%. So that's my first message for you tonight. If you have a multicultural relationship, or if you're thinking about one, you are not alone. Somewhere between 3 and 10% of all relationships worldwide are considered multicultural. And the reason for these kind of fuzzy statistics is that, you know, how do you qualify it and how do you measure it? Is it based on just nationality alone? Well, there are 195 countries in the world, right? So that would mean that there's a potential of 18,915 possible international combinations for love, which is a lot, isn't it? But I hope you're sitting comfortably, because that is just the beginning. A multicultural relationship is so much more than just passport country or nationality. You know, it's things like language, culture, religion, color, ethnicity. These are the things that make up a multicultural relationship. But before I go on, I'd like to share with you, or we need a name, you know, for this international merrymaking, I think. Well, I call them glolo relationships. Yeah, like J-Lo, okay. So glolo couples, or glolos, like I'm a glolo, they have glolo weddings, you know, glolo children, you get it, right? They celebrate glolo holidays together, and they even have glolo funerals, but I'll get to that later. So the question is then, what is the difference between a multicultural glolo relationship and a monocultural relationship, non-glolo? Well, we know what happened when Harry meets Sally, right? But what happens when, like, Heinrich meets Sanvi, or Hashiro meets Sumiko? I'd like to answer this question by sharing with you two multicultural stories. When I was doing the interviews for my book, I met with Julia and Samson. And Julia is in her mid-30s. She's an academic researcher at a university on the east coast of the US. And that's where she met Samson. He was a visiting professor from Chad in Africa. And their relationship, it got off to a very good start. So Julia invited Samson home over the Christmas holidays to meet her family. And the story kind of goes like, she took him home, they arrived on Christmas Day, and it was fantastic. You know, there was like this huge turkey dinner with all the trimmings, and Samson thought, oh, this is so nice, you know, and he felt really welcomed into the home, and he was impressed with Julia's family. On the second night, they had, again, turkey for dinner. But of course, this time it wasn't quite as spectacular as the night before, and there weren't so many trimmings. And Samson even said, you know, it kind of looked like it had been in a motorcycle accident. On the third night, then, they had turkey for dinner. And this time, it was in the form of sandwiches, you know, with some hot gravy on top. So let's look at this. From an American perspective, Julia's family was actually quite hospitable toward Samson. Remember, she's pushing 40 here. He's a professor from a prestigious university, so a good catch, right? So everybody was trying to pitch in to make things work out well. But he didn't necessarily feel that. He was a little bit confused by the way they treated him. And he was even wondering, you know, why is this, you know, sort of middle-class family always eating this mangled-up old turkey, you know, and did it have something to do with him? And now here's why. In Chad, when guests are welcomed into the home, they are given the best food that money can buy. Okay, they're treated with honor. They're not given leftovers. And Samson actually said that his family, they give the leftovers, you know, to the peasants or to the goats. And so he said, you know, Julia's family, sometimes they were friendly, but it was kind of like they were friendly towards a goat. So the happy ending to the story is that Julia and Samson were later invited to a dinner party. And Samson had complimented the host on the excellent meal. And then the host became very excited and said, you know what? Actually, tomorrow, the meal will taste even better. And then I'm going to take the meat and put it into a sandwich and take it to work on Monday. And that's going to be the best meal of all. And all of the Americans at the table were very excited, and they were extolling the virtues of the leftover. And it was in this moment that Samson recognized, you know, there's no social hierarchy to leftovers. And he also recognized that Julia's family were being very hospitable, and they were welcoming him into their home and into their family. So now, when Julia cooks, Samson asks her to always make extras so that he can bring it to work for his lunch on Monday. So that's the globalization of leftovers, right? Now, everyone eats worldwide. You know, there's no culture shock there. But sometimes it's big things. It's easy to spot. So if you think of like a meat eater with a vegetarian, okay, that's easy. But sometimes it's a little bit more subtle. So let's say you want to put, you know, want to spice up a dish a bit, and you say, okay, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. And then your partner says, okay, I'll spice up the dinner, don't worry. And then, you know, you eat the food and it becomes like this total out-of-body experience because it's so hot and spicy. And sometimes, you know, it can just be a little bit confusing. So if, for example, you say, let's have stew for dinner tonight, shall we? And your partner says, okay, it's your idea. You get it, right? Hence, whatever is cooking in the Glolo kitchen, it requires a certain degree of culinary compromise and some good communication, doesn't it? The next story, then, I'd like to share with you is about funerals. I promised you funerals, right? And this is my own personal experience with two family funerals that we had recently. So it started in Canada. We had to go to Canada. It was for my father's funeral. And, because I hadn't seen him for several months before he passed away, on the morning of the funeral, I asked my husband, would you like to go and see Dad with me? And my husband kind of said, well, he looked a bit confused, and I thought maybe it's the jet lag. And he said, we're here for his funeral, and he's passed away, so we can't, see him anymore, right? And I said, well, of course we can see him. We'll see him at the funeral, right? And that's when he looked, really alarmed. But we are an experienced Lolo couple, so we recognized, okay, we're talking about two different types of funerals here. And in Canada, an open-casket funeral, which is very common, is not very frequently practiced in Austria. And my husband, he hadn't experienced this before, and he felt a little bit uncomfortable with it. He said, it's kind of like watching somebody sleep, isn't it? Or, it's just kind of creepy, right? But when he said that, it was sounded really manly. And so there we are in the middle of this very sad family situation, and we've got this Glolo moment to deal with. So my mom got involved, and she said, oh no, it's not going to be creepy. My husband, he was a very handsome man. And I assure you, he's going to look good today, too, right? So, talk about pressure, right? Well, in any case, my husband, he's open-minded, he's very tolerant. He married me, so we went, in fact, to see my dad. And my mother was right. My father did look very handsome, all things considered. And my husband walked up to my dad, and he said, I'm so sorry, we got here as soon as we could. And they kind of had a nice chat together, And my husband later told me that he really appreciated the experience. He kind of liked, he thought it was a proper way to say goodbye. And he kind of liked this, this custom of hanging out with the dead, as he called it. So that was funeral number one. Fast forward a few months, and there we were at another family funeral. And this time, it was my Austrian father-in-law. And this was a particularly difficult time for our daughter. She was very young, and she was learning about death. And, there was a lot of family sadness that she had to deal with. And then in very quick succession, two grandfathers, first Canadian grandpa and then Austrian Opa pass away. So we were at Opa's funeral in Austria, and the service was about to begin, and she points up to the closed casket, and she says, Mommy, is Opa in that box? And I said, yeah, he is. And she said, well, how do you know? And I think we should check, because if it's somebody else, then we're saying goodbye to the wrong man. Now, I thought, okay, this is not the kind of thing that they tend to get mixed up, usually. But from her perspective, of course, it was a very valid point, wasn't very valid questions. Well, fortunately, the organ music started, the service began, and that was nice. And then at the end, a hearse took away the box with, hopefully, Opa inside. And then my daughter asked me, well, where are they taking Opa? Is he going to the same place that Grandpa went to? And I thought, that's heartwarming, isn't it? And I said, yes, he is. Isn't that nice? And she said, I don't know how that's going to work, Mommy. Grandpa only speaks English. Opa only speaks German. So that's the globalization of funerals. Death is universal. I'm sorry to ruin the mood tonight. Regardless of country or culture, it will happen. It's just that it will happen differently. So religion, kind of provides the framework for the rituals that people perform when someone has passed away. And in a global relationship, in an interfaith relationship, then sometimes you're kind of exposed to some things that maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable, or maybe feel even a little bit creepy. So that brings me to my second message for you tonight, which is whether it's food or funerals, whether it's language or religion, whether it's planning a Glolo wedding, okay, don't get me started there, or finding a name for Glolo children. Multicultural relationships, they are complex. They have all of the issues that you have in a monocultural relationship. Okay, so sex, money, laundry, right? Plus, they have whatever cultural combination of variables that a couple brings into their marriage. Despite these challenges, Glolo couples demonstrate on a daily basis that peace between different countries, cultures, and religions is possible. So this is my daughter, Glolo Jr. She's like a typical Glolo kid. You know, she had her first frequent flyer card when she was 2 years old. She speaks 2 languages fluently. She started correcting my German when she was 3 years old. And now she's in 2nd grade. So you can imagine how much I am learning. Well, what will her future look like? Globalization is not going anywhere, nor is technology, right? Hence, the future of romance and the future of families, it will increasingly be international, multicultural, biracial, interfaith, and ethnically diverse. And by virtue of the fact that she's growing up Glolo, she actually has an important role to play in our globalized village. Like all Glolo kids, she has inadvertently become a mini ambassador for world peace. What makes multicultural kids interesting in this context is they are not one culture or the other, they are both. And you know, world peace, it really does begin at home. It starts every morning at the Glolo family breakfast table. And children learn from their parents that differences can coexist. Different colors, different religions, different languages, different cultures all together. And ultimately, what this does, it weaves the foundation for a world that is connected by families whose separate histories become one family history, whose unique traditions and values are shared, whose colors blend, and whose sphere of personal interest, it broadens so that people start to understand, like things that happen way over there, you know, things you hear about on the 6 o'clock news, those things are relevant to people way over here too. Yet still, globalization has a bad reputation, doesn't it? And there are many things going very wrong. But ultimately, globalization and technology are connecting people. And when people are connected globally, people from everywhere fall in love with people from everywhere else. So now a short interactive part. If you could please raise your hand if you have a Glolo relationship, or if you know someone who has a Glolo relationship, or maybe now you want your very own Glolo relationship. Well, my final message for you tonight, then, is you are all ambassadors for world peace. You have the collective power, and dare I say, responsibility, to help make globalization work. It's through understanding and tolerance of cultural differences, through seeing the people behind the national and the cultural labels that we give each other. And it's through recognizing that fundamentally, we are all more alike than are we different. So there's kind of a revolution going on out there, don't you think? I call it the Glolo revolution, and it all starts with the globalization of love. Thank you.